Hi, my name is Paul Sobel. I'm currently serving as a senior advisor to the International Internal Audit Standards Board on the IPPF Evolution Project. I'm here today to talk about Domain 3, governing the internal audit function. First, a quick refresher on the structure of the draft Global Internal Audit Standards. There are 5 domains, 15 principles, and 53 standards. First domain focuses on the overall purpose of internal auditing, which includes elements of the previous mission and definition. Second domain is ethics and professionalism, which covers the prior code of ethics as well as certain of the standards from the previous standards as well. That applies primarily to individuals. The last 3 domains focus on the internal audit function itself. It's governing the internal audit function, managing the internal audit function, and then performing individual internal audits. Now let's take a little closer look at Domain 3, governing the internal audit function. There are 3 principles and 9 standards involved with this domain. A couple of high-level points, first of all. When people look at this and see requirements of the board, their initial response is, wait a minute, these are internal audit standards. How can internal auditors require the board to do certain things? Well, that may appear to be true on the surface, but in fact, the way the Standards Board approached this was to make it much more about the partnership that must occur between the board and the chief audit executive. So while there are requirements of the board, there are also requirements of the CAE to help enable the board in their requirements, and there's joint responsibilities as well. Now, the key here is that if the board really desires to have an effective internal audit function, one that can truly achieve that purpose of internal auditing, it has to take on certain responsibilities. And this domain covers those responsibilities to help ensure that there can be an effective internal audit function that truly enables organizational success. Now, the other thing that's important to note is that the definition of board has been expanded. You can find it in the glossary to the standards, as well as the introduction to Domain 3. And the key point here is that the definition should now cover every organization, regardless of governance structure. Now, for most people, that's probably a committee of the board. Audit committee is certainly very common. Some cases, there are 2-tier board structures. In other cases, the public sector will be a little different. And if you're in maybe a small, closely or privately held organization, governance may look a little different there as well. It's important to look at this definition and understand how your particular governance situation fits it. Now let's get into the principles quickly. First principle focuses on being authorized by the board, and we introduce a concept here called the internal audit mandate. It's not really new, but it's more formally discussed as really the role, responsibilities, and authorities of an internal audit function. Those are probably all included before in your internal audit charter, but the key here is to have that discussion early on to make sure that there's a unified view from the board through the CAE on exactly what the mandate is for internal auditing. And that mandate will still be documented in the internal audit charter. The second principle relates to independence, and this is nothing new. Again, independence has been a hallmark of the internal audit profession for decades. The key here is that the first standard focuses on making sure that the internal audit function is organizationally independent, so it's position independent with direct reporting to the board. And secondly, talks about situations where the chief audit executive may take on additional roles beyond internal audit, similar to what were in the previous standards. And then it talks about the various safeguards that can be taken in those situations or other situations that could threaten independence. Then finally, Principle 8 focuses on the oversight that the board needs to provide. It's really the ongoing activities. Principles 6 and 7 can be viewed as maybe a one-time or once-a-year event, where Principle 8 is that throughout the year ongoing oversight that occurs. Talks about the interaction that must occur, the conversations about sufficiency of resources, and then focuses also on the quality assurance and improvement program. Now, the specifics of that program are discussed more fully in Principle 12 under managing the internal audit function. But what we do in this particular principle is talk about the important role that the board plays in making sure that the internal audit function and the CA in particular are focused on a quality internal audit function, including the external quality assessment. Now, I'll mention at this point that we believe quality goes beyond just conformance with the standards. It also includes performance against objectives agreed to with the board. So when you look at it that way and you think about this domain as a partnership between internal auditing and the board, it shouldn't really be that difficult to do. We're not requiring new things of the board. These are things that were really embedded in the previous standards. They're just more explicitly stated now and outlined to make it clear to the board on the sorts of things that they've probably already been doing, but they need to more formally do, and make sure that the CAE is doing what they need to formally do to support that. And then jointly, they can make sure that this internal audit function can be very effective and achieve the purpose. Thank you very much for listening today, and I encourage you to view the videos on the other domains as well.